It started with a sound, a quiet click of a lock turning every night after dinner. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious at first, just routine. But routine has a way of becoming the first crack in peace. For years, I told myself it was just work. My husband, Aaron, was meticulous about his privacy. He'd always been that way, organized, methodical, the kind of man who labeled folders and color-coded memories. But somewhere between the late-night phone calls and the shift in his tone when I entered the room, something in me began to ache. If you like the story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are watching my story. His office was off limits. That was the rule. He said it so casually once, I almost didn't notice how firm his eyes were when he did. "I just need a space to think," he'd said. But thinking doesn't need a lock. And love doesn't need permission to breathe in the same room. I tried not to care. I truly did. I'd pour myself tea at midnight and tell myself stories to fill the silence. Maybe he was working on a surprise. Maybe he was writing something personal, something he wasn't ready to share. Maybe the distance wasn't about me, but lies, even kind ones, have a weight. They press against your ribs until your heart starts to pulse with questions you don't want to ask. One night, I woke to the sound of the lock again. 2:17 a.m., the soft metallic click, the faint shuffle of papers, a drawer opening, then silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, wondering what kind of secret needs tending to at such an hour. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the silence grew between us. He had changed. Not in the ways people write about, not with cruelty or neglect, but in subtler ways. The way his eyes avoided mine when I said I loved him. The way his smile never quite reached the corners of his mouth. The warmth that once filled our home now lived only in photographs. He still kissed my forehead before bed, still asked about my day, still laughed at the right moments. But something vital was missing. He was there, and yet I was living beside a shadow that wore his face. It wasn't just the office. It was the distance in his gaze, the hesitation in his touch. Every locked night felt like another brick between us, and I could feel the walls closing in. I started to count. 3 weeks. Then 4. Every night the same ritual. Dinner, dishes, soft conversation, then the door that sealed itself shut. I became quiet too. I learned to mimic his composure, to pretend I didn't notice the secrecy dripping from the walls. But inside I was unraveling thread by thread. It's strange, the kind of madness love breeds when it's fed by silence. You start doubting your own mind. Maybe you're too suspicious. Maybe you're too emotional. Maybe this is what marriage looks like after years, the quiet settling of two strangers under one roof. But deep down, I knew better. Love isn't supposed to suffocate. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I saw his keyring on the counter. The silver key, his office key, was missing. A small, ridiculous thing, but my stomach twisted anyway. When he came home later, I asked where he'd been. He said, "At work." His tone was casual, his eyes steady. But I noticed the faint mark on his wrist, like a burn. That night, he locked the door again. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, listening to the faint hum of something mechanical behind the wood. My reflection in the doorknob looked warped, small, and scared. I wanted to knock. I wanted to ask what he was hiding, why the truth had to live behind a lock. But I didn't. I just stood there until the light under the door went out. Days turned into weeks. My curiosity hardened into dread. Then, one night, I heard him whispering low, shaky, to someone. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Tender, familiar. That was the moment something inside me cracked. The next morning, while he was at work, I stood outside the office door, my hand hovering over the handle. I could almost feel the heat of all his secrets pressing against the other side. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to pretend it didn't matter. But some truths don't stay buried just because you close your eyes. So I made a decision. That night, when he fell asleep, I would find out what he'd been locking away all these years, not to destroy him, not even to accuse him. I just needed to know if the man I loved still existed somewhere behind that door, or if he'd been gone long before I noticed Dot, because sometimes it's not the lies that destroy you, it's the silence that makes you believe them. That night felt longer than any night before. The air hung heavy, like the house itself was waiting for something to happen. Aaron fell asleep beside me, steady breaths against the quiet. I lay awake, my heart sinking with the tick of the clock, every second pulling me closer to what I was about to do. I told myself it was only curiosity, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But the truth was simpler and much sadder. I just needed proof that my instincts hadn't betrayed me, that the unease growing inside me wasn't madness. At 2:30 a.m., when his breathing deepened into sleep, I slipped out of bed. The floor creaked softly beneath my bare feet, every sound amplified by fear. I froze at each noise, waiting for him to stir, but he didn't. The hallway stretched before me, dark and narrow. At the end of it stood the office door, closed, silent, ordinary, and yet it pulsed with a kind of quiet menace. The faint scent of old paper and stale air seeped through the crack beneath it. I'd stolen the spare key earlier that day. It had been in the junk drawer under old receipts, forgotten batteries, and broken pens. I remember staring at it for a long time before slipping it into my pocket, as though it were an act of treason. My hands trembled as I fit the key into the lock. For a moment, I hesitated, part of me still hoping that on the other side would be nothing more than files and dust. Maybe I'd laugh at myself later for ever doubting him. Maybe this would restore what? Silence had eroded. The lock turned with a soft click. The door opened a few inches before stopping. The smell hit me first, metallic, sharp, mixed with something faintly medicinal. Not the scent of an office. Something colder. I pushed it open. The room wasn't what I remembered. Gone were the tidy stacks of paperwork, the framed certificates, the neat desk. Instead, it looked like a space frozen in time, half darkness, half memory. A single lamp glowed over the desk, casting shadows on the walls. There were boxes stacked high, labels faded and peeling. Old photographs scattered across the floor, some torn in half, others turned face down as if to hide from the light, and on the desk files. Dozens of them, all marked with my husband's handwriting. Each one was labeled with names I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I reached for the nearest one. Inside were letters. Personal, intimate letters. All from women. Some recent, some old. Their handwriting is soft, confessional. I skimmed one, my eyes catching on phrases like, "You promised me he'd never find out, and I can't keep this secret anymore." For a moment, my knees nearly gave way. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the paper, but as I read further, I realized something worse. These weren't love letters. They were threats. Accusations, pleas. Every letter spoke of something hidden. A mistake. A cover-up. A promise Aaron had made and broken. My stomach twisted. I reached for another folder. Then another. Each one told a story that didn't match the man I thought I knew. A man who'd lied, not once, but for years. Not just to me, but to everyone who trusted him. He'd been falsifying records, stealing from the charity he managed, using funds meant for families in crisis to build the life we lived so comfortably, and worse, he'd silenced the ones who tried to speak. Payments, threats, empty promises. The same charm he used to win people over was the weapon he used to destroy them when they became inconvenient. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of his deceit. The air felt too thin to breathe. The man sleeping in our bed was a stranger, and he had been for years, and then I saw it, a photograph, folded neatly in half. I opened it with shaking hands. It was of a woman, her face familiar. I'd seen her once at one of Aaron's company events. She was laughing, her hand resting on his arm. The caption on the back was written in his handwriting. "For the one who still believes in me." My throat tightened. There was another envelope beneath it, sealed, marked only with one word: confession. I hesitated. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter, his handwriting again. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even recent. If you're reading this, then everything's already fallen apart. I did what I had to. It wasn't greed. It was survival. They never would have understood. The money was never meant to hurt anyone. But I lost control. I couldn't stop. And now she knows. She's threatening to expose me. I'll fix it before she does. I dropped the letter. The room tilted. My pulse thundered in my ears. He wasn't just hiding secrets, he was burying them. Literally. At the bottom of one of the boxes were folders marked with police reports. Missing persons. The woman in the photograph is among them. My breath caught as I saw her name listed under a closed case file, unresolved, but noted with a single signature at the bottom. His. The sound that came out of me wasn't a sob. It was something deeper. Something I didn't know I was capable of. All this time, I thought he was protecting himself from judgment, from failure. But what he was really protecting was darkness, and I'd been sleeping beside it. The floor creaked behind me. My body froze. "Ava," his voice said softly from the doorway. I turned. He was standing there, eyes wide but calm, like a man who'd known this moment would come. "I told you never to come in here," he said quietly. There was no anger, no panic, just exhaustion. For a moment, neither of us moved. The space between us was filled with years of deceit, love, and all the small moments that suddenly meant nothing. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shatter everything around me. But I couldn't. The truth had already done that for me. He took a step forward. "You shouldn't have done this." His voice wasn't threatening, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made me realize how much danger I was in. I backed away slowly, the edge of the desk pressing into my spine, and then I saw it, the glint of metal peeking out from under a stack of papers. A gun. My mind went blank. He followed my gaze. His face changed, softened, then hardened again. "Ava," he said quietly, "you weren't supposed to see any of this." The house fell silent, and in that silence, I understood. The man I married wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't even the man I thought I'd lost. He was something else entirely. The air between us felt thick with the weight of what couldn't be undone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of surviving him. He stood in the doorway, eyes locked on mine, the faint light from the desk lamp carving his face into harsh lines I'd never seen before. For years, I'd thought of Aaron as the calm one, the anchor when everything else felt uncertain. But the man in front of me wasn't calm. He was calculating. "Ava," he said again, softer this time, "put the file down." His voice had that same gentle command it always carried when he wanted control without raising it. The kind that made you obey before you even realized you had. But I didn't move. "I COULD in single quotes T. The file trembled in my hands, the papers inside rustling like whispers of every lie he'd ever told. "What is this?" I managed, my voice barely holding steady. "What did you do?" He sighed, running a hand over his face. "You weren't supposed to find that letter." "That's not an answer," I said, louder now. "Who is she?" "The woman in the photo, the one in the police report." He flinched, just slightly, but enough to tell me I'd hit the truth. "She was a mistake," he said. "A mistake I fixed." The words sank in slowly, cold and heavy. My stomach turned. "Fixed?" He met my eyes without blinking. "You don't understand what was at stake, Ava. Everything I built. Everything we have, it could have all disappeared." I stared at him, disbelief crawling up my spine. "You took money from a charity, Aaron. You hurt people who trusted you. And you're telling me I don't understand? His face hardened. I saved us. No, I whispered. You damned us? He stepped closer, his shadow falling across the desk. You think this life appeared out of thin air? That house, those vacations, your art studio, it all came from me taking risks. From doing what others wouldn't, by lying, by stealing. His jaw tightened. By surviving. I could feel the weight of his words pressing against my chest. This wasn't a confession, it was justification. He believed every word. Where is she? I asked quietly. The woman in the report. For a long moment, he said nothing. His silence was worse than any answer. Then he finally spoke. Gone. My throat went dry. Gone? He looked away. She threatened to expose me? I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't stop. So I made sure she couldn't. The air vanished from my lungs. The walls seemed to close in. He looked at me then, his eyes soft with something that almost resembled pity. Don't look at me like that. You think I wanted this? I did it for us. For you, for me? I said, the words tasting like poison. You think I wanted this? He took another step forward. I know you, Ava. You've always liked the life we have. The comfort. The security. Don't pretend you didn't know where it came from. I shook my head, backing away until my hands hit the edge of the desk. I didn't know because you made sure I didn't. You built a prison out of comfort and called it love. He smiled then sadly, almost fondly. You always were dramatic. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart. But instead, I reached for the envelope on the desk, the one marked confession. His eyes followed my movement, narrowing slightly. You're not taking that, he said. Voice low now. I'm going to the police, I said. My voice trembling but sure. He tilted his head, that familiar mask of patience slipping into place. And tell them what? That your husband taking some money? That you broke into his office in the middle of the night? You think they'll believe you? They'll believe the files, I said. He laughed a sound that made my skin crawl. You think I didn't prepare for that? Every document in this room ties back to you. Every transfer, every authorization. You've been signing things for years, Ava. Remember those forms you never read? The ones I said were just for the board? The blood drained from my face. You wouldn't. He took another step closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. I already did. It felt like the ground had opened beneath me. He had me trapped. Every safety net, every reassurance I thought existed was gone. I glanced at the gun again. He followed my gaze and gave a small, cold smile. You won't need that, he said. You're not like me. He was right. I wasn't, but I was done being afraid. I'm leaving, I said. And I'm taking those files with me. He stepped in front of the door, blocking the exit. No, you're not. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was years of silence finally breaking. I didn't care anymore. I believed in you, I said, my voice cracking. Through everything, when you lost your job, when you said we'd rebuild, when you locked yourself away night after night. I thought you were working for us. But you were building a lie. A life built on someone else's pain. He stared at me for a long moment. You still don't get it. The world doesn't reward honesty, Ava. It rewards power. And I took it. Then you can keep it, I said. Because I want no part of it. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You always say that until it's time to live without it. Something flickered behind his eyes, something unstable, dangerous. He moved toward me again, slow and deliberate. You're not leaving. You'll stay, you'll keep quiet, and in time, you'll realize this was the only way. I grabbed the nearest file and held it against my chest. If you come closer, I'll scream. He smiled faintly. No one would hear you. I soundproofed the office years ago. The realization hit like ice water. I hadn't even noticed. The thick walls, the sealed door, The way the air felt heavy, it wasn't just for privacy. He'd planned this space to keep secrets, and now I was one. For a moment, we stood there, breathing the same poisoned air, both knowing something irreversible was about to happen. Then the sound shattered the silence. A knock. Sharp, sudden. It came from the front door. Aaron froze. His expression shifted: confusion, then calculation. Who the hell? Another knock, louder this time. He turned toward the hall. I used the moment. I grabbed the confession letter, the photograph, and a handful of files. My pulse roared in my ears as I shoved them into the pocket of my robe and ran for the back door. I could hear him behind me, calling my name, his voice rising not in fear, but fury. I burst into the cold night barefoot, clutching the evidence like a lifeline. The grass was wet under my feet. I didn't stop running until I reached the end of the street. That's when I saw the flashing lights. 2 police cars were parked across from the house. They weren't there for me. Not yet, but I knew they soon would be, one way or another. And as I stood there, watching my husband open the door to them, calm and composed, I realized something chilling. He wasn't afraid. He expected them. He'd planned for this too, because in his mind, even now, he was still in control. But this time, he'd underestimated me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the silent wife behind his lies. I was the witness, and he had no idea what I was about to do next. The police lights painted my husband's face in alternating shades of red and blue, but his expression didn't change. He looked calm, too calm. The same calmness that had once made me trust him. Now it terrified me. I hid behind the tree line across the street, my robe damp, my hands still trembling from clutching the files. My breath came in shallow gasps, but my mind was clear for the first time in years. 2 officers stepped inside the house. Aaron's gestures were smooth, rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I knew then what he was doing. He was spinning the story, making himself the victim before I could. So I did the only thing I could. I ran, the files pressed against my ribs, each one a fragment of truth I had to keep alive. The air stung my face, but I didn't stop until I reached the gas station down the road. The clerk gave me a strange look as I stumbled in barefoot, but I didn't care. I asked to use the phone. The first number I called wasn't the police. It was Emily. My sister. The one who'd stopped calling years ago when Aaron made it clear she wasn't good for us. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Ava? My throat tightened. I hadn't heard her voice in almost 5 years. I whispered. I need your help. Silence. Then, cautiously, what happened? I looked down at my shaking hands, the papers clutched between them. Aaron's been hiding something. Crimes. There's a file proof everything. I need to get it to someone before he... My voice broke. Ava, where are you? I told her. She didn't hesitate. Stay there. I'm coming. While I waited, I flipped through the papers again, forcing myself to read what I hadn't had the strength to before. Transfers, shell accounts, falsified signatures. All under my name. He'd made me his scapegoat, one document at a time. By the time Emily's car screeched into the lot, I was barely holding it together. She ran to me, eyes wide with shock. God, Ava, what happened to you? Later, I said, climbing into the passenger seat. We have to go somewhere safe? Police? She asked. Not yet. He's 1 step ahead of them. She didn't argue. She just drove. The city lights blurred past, and for a moment, it felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel. The house. The years. The trust. All of it slipping through my fingers like water. When we finally stopped, we were in front of a small newspaper office, one of those local places Aaron always dismissed as irrelevant. Emily turned to me. A friend of mine works here. She owes me a favor. Inside, the smell of ink and dust hit me, grounding me. Emily's friend, Nora, looked up from her desk, clearly surprised. "This better be good," she said before her eyes landed on me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said quietly. "And I'm married to him." Nora didn't ask questions. She listened. As I laid out everything, the files, the confession letter, the accounts, her face shifted from skepticism to shock. "This is serious," she said. "You're saying he's been embezzling money for years? From charity funds?" I nodded. "And he framed me for all of it." She scanned the documents quickly, eyes sharp. "These signatures, these are yours?" "Yes, but I never signed them." Nora leaned back, thinking fast. "All right. I can't publish this immediately. Not without verifying. But if this is real, it's going to blow up everything." "I need it to," I said. She studied me, then nodded. "Give me a few hours." While she worked, Emily sat with me in the corner, her hand resting over mine. "You should have told me, Ava." "I thought he was protecting me," I said. "Turns out he was just covering his tracks." We waited in silence, the hum of printers filling the space. It felt strange being surrounded by people again. People who believed me without needing proof of love first. When Nora returned, she looked different, more focused, urgent. "Ava, this is bigger than I thought. Your husband's name is on multiple contracts linked to shell foundations. And there's another name, someone high up in the city council." I frowned. "He said he had partners." "I didn't know they were politicians." "Then you'll want to hear this," she said. "One of the foundations he stole from? It funded a housing project. The same one that collapsed last year." My heart stopped. I remembered the headlines. The families, the lives lost. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen lives. I stood up, shaking. "You have to release it." Nora hesitated. "If I do, it could put you in danger." "I've been in danger for years," I said. "At least this way, it means something." Before she could answer, the front door banged open. A man in a dark coat stepped in, flashing a badge. "Detective Ramos, City Police. We're looking for Ava Cole." My stomach dropped. Nora glanced at me, then back at him. "What's this about?" The detective's eyes flicked to the folder on the desk. "Her husband reported a break-in. He says sensitive company material was stolen." Emily stood between us instinctively. "You can't take her." "I'm not arresting her," Ramos said evenly. "But I do need her to come down to the station. For her own safety." It sounded rehearsed. Too polite. Something in me screamed that this wasn't what it looked like. Still, I went. Because running again would only prove Aaron right, that I was the guilty one. At the station, Ramos led me to a small interview room. "I've seen cases like this before," he said, lowering his voice. "Powerful men. Clean records. Dirty hands. You did the right thing, Mrs. Cole." I blinked. "You believe me?" He gave a small smile. "Your husband's story doesn't add up." "And that letter?" "It's enough to start a full audit." Relief flooded me, brief, fragile, but it didn't last. When I left the station hours later, the sky was already turning gray. Emily was waiting by the car, a folded newspaper in her hands. She didn't speak. Just handed it to me. The headline read, "Local businessman Aaron Cole under investigation for fraud. Wife accused as accomplice." My name was right there, next to his. He'd managed to twist it again. My knees went weak. Emily caught me before I fell. "He's faster," I whispered. "He's always one step ahead." "Then we take bigger steps," she said. "We're not done yet." That night, Nora called again. "Ava, listen. The story's spreading. And I found something else. Your husband withdrew money yesterday, large amounts from offshore accounts. He's planning to disappear." I stared at the dark window, my reflection hollow and tired. "Then he won't get the chance." Because this wasn't just about exposing him anymore. It was about ending his power over me. The next morning, I stood in front of his office building, clean, modern, cold. The place where his empire had been built on deceit, Security tried to stop me. They couldn't. By noon, the story broke nationwide. Nora had gone live naming names, showing proof. Aaron's face flashed across every screen. The confident man in the expensive suit suddenly cornered. I watched from the street as police cars pulled up. For once, he wasn't calm. He was pale, small, cornered by truth. When they led him out in handcuffs, his eyes found mine across the crowd. He didn't look angry. He looked betrayed. As if I'd broken his trust, but I didn't look away, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. And when the cameras turned toward me, I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken louder than I ever could. After the arrest, silence became both my punishment and my comfort. The house, our house, felt unrecognizable, as if every wall had absorbed his lies and now exhaled them in whispers. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, sharp and expensive, mixed with a faint scent of fear I could never quite name. For days, I didn't open the curtains. Reporters camped outside, flashing cameras through the fence like vultures waiting for the corpse of a story to twitch. The neighbors pretended to be concerned, but I saw the curiosity in their eyes, that quiet thrill of watching someone else's perfect life fall apart. Emily stayed with me. She cooked meals I barely tasted, talked to people I didn't want to face. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me like she wasn't sure if I'd shatter or rebuild. I didn't know either. On the third night, I finally stepped outside. The air was colder than I remembered, sharper, as if it wanted to remind me that I was still here, still breathing. I walked to the edge of the driveway and stared down the street where the police cars had once lined up. It was peaceful now, almost insultingly so. Inside, the answering machine blinked. I pressed play. His voice filled the room. "Ava, don't believe everything you're hearing. They're twisting it. I can fix this. Just don't say anything, please." Click. Another message followed, then another, all the same. The same voice that once said "I love you" now pleading for silence. By the fifth message, the calmness returned to his tone. Cold, controlled. "If you think you've won, you haven't. You'll see how fast they turn on you." He was right. 2 days later, the news anchor's voice cracked with excitement. New developments in the coal embezzlement case. Anonymous sources suggest the wife may have been more involved than she claims. My stomach dropped. The camera panned over our house. My face, a freeze frame from an old company event, filled the screen. They'd already started rewriting the story. That night, Emily found me sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at nothing. "You can't stay here," she said. "It's not safe." "I didn't do anything wrong," I whispered. "I know. But they don't care about truth right now. They care about headlines." She was right again. Truth takes time. Lies move faster. We packed what little mattered and left before dawn. Her old apartment felt too small for both of us, but it was safe. The kind of safe that comes with secondhand furniture and nobody knowing your last name. For weeks, I lived quietly, waiting for something. Maybe an apology. Maybe a new beginning. What I got instead was paperwork, subpoenas, legal notices, financial audits. The world didn't pause for heartbreak. It buried you in signatures and deadlines. But somewhere in that mess, I found purpose. I started going through every file I'd kept, the bank records, the correspondence, the project documents. At first, it was just to protect myself, but the deeper I looked, the more I realized how many others had been hurt by him. Employees who lost pensions, clients who'd been blacklisted, small businesses that had gone bankrupt because of his schemes. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about them. So I started sending letters. Carefully worded, anonymous at first, to lawyers, journalists, and investigators. Piece by piece, I built a chain of truth too heavy for anyone to ignore. And slowly, the tide shifted, headlines changed tone. News anchors stopped saying accomplice and started saying whistleblower. It didn't erase the pain, but it felt like oxygen after drowning. Months passed. Aaron stayed behind bars, his trial delayed again and again. His lawyers tried to spin it, said he was a victim of manipulation, that I'd forged documents to frame him. But the evidence was clear now. The trail led only one way. One afternoon, a letter arrived with the state seal. I almost didn't open it. Inside was an official statement. All charges against me dropped. Full clearance. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the paper. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a release. That night, I walked through the empty house one last time. The furniture was gone, sold to pay debts I never owed. The rooms echoed. Every sound felt bigger, sadder. In the bedroom, I found one last box, his. Inside were old photos, awards, and a small key wrapped in paper. My handwriting, I didn't remember writing it, but there it was, for when you decide to be honest. The key belonged to the office I had broken into, the one where the truth began. I left it on the windowsill and walked out. Outside, the city lights blinked in the distance, soft and indifferent. I thought about how small we are, how easily we let someone else define our worth. Aaron once said I'd never survive without him. He was wrong. I wasn't just surviving now. I was free, but freedom isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It's quiet. It's sitting in a dim apartment with the window cracked open, and realizing you don't flinch when you hear footsteps outside. It's answering the phone without fear. It's laughing again without guilt. Weeks later, I received another envelope, this one from the newspaper. Inside was a printed article titled, "The Woman Who Brought Down a Lie." They'd written about me, not as a victim, not as a wife, but as a survivor. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal. Not as proof, but as a reminder that pain, when faced fully, doesn't destroy you. It shapes you. And in that shape, you find something unbreakable. The next morning, I started working again, not in finance, but with a nonprofit that helped women rebuild after betrayal, financial or emotional. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had once thought my life's worth was tied to a man's success. Now, I was helping others untie themselves from that same illusion. Every story I heard echoed pieces of my own. And every time I listened, I healed a little more. Then one afternoon, Emily called from the office lobby. "You might want to come down here," she said, her voice low. When I reached the front desk, he was there. Aaron, thinner, paler, no suit, no confidence, just the hollow shell of the man I once loved. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me, eyes empty. "I had no one else to call," he finally said. "They took everything?" I studied him for a long time. "So now you know how it feels." He flinched. "Ava, please. I don't have anywhere else to go." For a brief moment, I saw flashes of the man I'd once loved, the laughter, the promises. But love without truth is just an illusion. "There's a shelter downtown," I said quietly. "They help people rebuild." His face fell. "You're really not going to help me?" "I already did," I said, turning away. "I stopped you." And then I walked out, the door closing softly behind me. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like peace. I didn't look back when I left him standing in that lobby. For the first time, I didn't need to. The woman who once froze in his presence, who waited for approval, who mistook silence for peace, was gone. What stood in her place was someone lighter, quieter maybe, but real. The world after him was uncertain, but it was mine. I moved to a smaller city, one without familiar streets or shared memories. A new apartment, nothing fancy, just enough sunlight, just enough quiet. I learned to fill silence differently now, not with fear, not with his footsteps, but with the sound of my own becoming. I started running again. not away from something, but toward myself. The first morning I could barely make it 2 blocks before my chest burned, but I kept going each day a little further. By the end of the month, I didn't even time it anymore. I just ran until I felt free. The nonprofit grew faster than any of us expected. What began as a local outreach group soon gained traction online. We received letters from women all over, women who'd been betrayed, manipulated, dismissed, silenced. Some were executives who'd lost everything after a partner's scandal. Others were wives rebuilding from scratch. Each story carried the same thread: survival born from destruction. I didn't want to just listen. I wanted to build something permanent, something that outlived the pain. So I created the Phoenix Fund, a program to help women restart financially after divorce or loss. I spent sleepless nights writing proposals, sending pitches, and building partnerships. For months, it felt like pushing a boulder uphill. Until one morning, I got an email that changed everything. Subject: funding approval, greenlight. I'd secured a major corporate partnership. Ironically, the company's name glared at me from the letterhead: Coal Industries. My breath caught. It was his company, or what was left of it. I hadn't followed his downfall closely, but I'd heard whispers. After his arrest, the board had cut ties with him completely, rebranding and rebuilding under new management. It was no longer his, but the name still stung. For a moment, I considered rejecting the partnership. But then I thought about what it meant: the poetic symmetry of rebuilding my life through the very ashes of his empire. So I signed. That afternoon, I visited their headquarters for the first time. Walking through those glass doors again felt surreal. Last time, I was a silent wife waiting in the lobby, clutching a coffee, smiling politely. Now I was walking in as a partner, a founder, a name on the contract. A woman greeted me in the lobby, young, sharp, confident. "Mrs. Hart?" I smiled. "Just Ava, please." She nodded. "The board's waiting for you." As I entered the conference room, a hush fell. The executives stood, polite smiles masking curiosity. At the head of the table sat Ethan Ward, the new CEO. He extended his hand. "We've been following your work. It's impressive." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "I believe rebuilding isn't just about numbers, it's about dignity." He nodded thoughtfully. I couldn't agree more. We signed the partnership that day. Cameras flashed, contracts exchanged, polite applause filled the room. But beneath all that, something inside me shifted, a quiet reclamation of every time I was told I wasn't enough. A week later, I received a message. It was from Aaron. He'd found out about the partnership. "You used my company." His message read: "You'll never escape me, Ava. Everything you touch has my name on it." For a moment, I felt the old fear rise again, that icy paralysis he'd once mastered so well. But then I looked around my office, at the women laughing in the hallway, at the framed certificate on my wall bearing my name, and I realized something. He was wrong. He didn't own this. He didn't own me. He was just a ghost haunting a life I no longer lived in. I didn't respond. I deleted the message, blocked his number, and went back to work. That night, I held a small event to launch the first phase of the Phoenix Fund. It wasn't grand, a rented hall, soft lights, maybe 50 people. But the energy in that room was electric. Women who had once been invisible were now standing, sharing, laughing. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and looked at the crowd. "I used to think survival meant keeping quiet," I said. "Enduring, forgiving, pretending. But silence isn't survival, it's surrender. And we don't owe surrender to anyone." Applause filled the room. I continued, "We're not rebuilding to prove anything to the people who broke us. We're rebuilding because we deserve to live fully, without shame, without apology." After the event, a woman approached me, middle-aged, nervous. "Your story," she whispered, "it sounds like mine." I thought I was the only one. I smiled softly. You're never the only one. Her eyes filled with tears. I haven't told anyone yet. Start by telling yourself, I said. That's how I began. When the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, I stood alone for a while. The silence felt different now, not hollow, but peaceful. For years, I'd lived inside someone else's story, written by his control and my fear. But tonight, I realized I'd started writing my own. Weeks turned into months. The Phoenix Fund grew beyond anything I imagined. Our name appeared in magazines, on talk shows, and in business columns. Investors called. Journalists asked for interviews. For once, I didn't flinch at attention. I spoke honestly, not as a symbol, not as a survivor, but as a woman who rebuilt from truth. And then one morning, as I stepped into my office, I saw a familiar figure standing by the window. Aaron, older, broken. His arrogance was replaced by desperation. How did you get in here? I asked, keeping my voice calm. They let me up, he said quickly. I just need a few minutes. I don't owe you that. He looked down. You don't, but I can't live like this anymore. I've lost everything, the money, the company, everyone. I thought I could fix it, but his voice cracked. You were right about all of it. I stayed silent. I'm sorry, he whispered finally. For everything. I believed him, not because he deserved it, but because he finally sounded human. I accept your apology, I said quietly. But it doesn't change what happened. He nodded. I know. He turned to leave, then paused. You've done well. I'm proud of you. It should have sounded like closure, but it didn't. It was just an echo of something that no longer mattered. After he left, I stood at the window, watching him disappear into the crowd. For years, I'd imagined what I'd say if I ever saw him again. I thought there'd be anger, tears, maybe even satisfaction. But all I felt was relief, because real healing doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you no longer need them to. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights. Somewhere below, people rushed home from work, cars honking, laughter echoing from the streets. Life in all its imperfect beauty kept moving, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was catching up. I was already home. Years pass quietly when peace replaces chaos. It doesn't announce itself. It just slips in slowly in the moments where fear used to live. I began to notice it in strange places, the way mornings felt lighter, how laughter came easier, how the silence in my home no longer felt like punishment but rest. Sometimes, I'd wake before dawn, sit by the window, and watch the city yawn awake. And I'd think about how small my world used to be, how every decision, every breath, orbited around one man's moods. It feels unreal now that I ever lived like that, but healing isn't a straight line. Some days, I'd still catch myself flinching at sudden noises, or hesitating before answering the phone. Traces of him lingered, not because I wanted them, but because trauma stains deeper than love ever does. Still, I moved forward. The Phoenix Fund had grown into something beyond me. We'd expanded across cities, partnered with global organizations, and even built shelters for women starting over. I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was helping thousands rebuild theirs, and maybe that's what redemption really looks like. Not revenge, not triumph, but creating something beautiful out of the wreckage. Then one morning, a familiar name appeared on my assistant's desk. Mrs. Hart. Someone named Aaron Cole is requesting an appointment. Says it's urgent. I froze. I told him you're booked for the week, she continued. But he left this. She handed me a small folded letter. My hands shook as I opened it. Ava, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to explain something once before it's too late. If you can find it in you to meet me, I'll be at the place we first met. Sunday noon. Aaron and I stared at the words until they blurred. The place we first met. The old library cafe downtown. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away. Another part, the part that once loved him, that once begged for honesty, needed to know what he wanted to say. That Sunday I went. The cafe hadn't changed much. The same wooden chairs, the same smell of roasted beans and old pages. Time hadn't touched it, but it had certainly touched him. He sat by the window, hunched, thinner, older. His hair had gone gray, his suit looked borrowed, and the arrogance that once defined him was gone. When he saw me, his eyes softened, not with charm this time, but something close to regret. "You came," he said quietly. "I did." He nodded, eyes dropping to the cup in front of him. "I've been sick. Heart failure. The doctors say it's manageable, but I don't have much time." "I didn't say anything," he continued, voice trembling. "I spent years hating you after you left. Blamed you for everything that went wrong. But after the company fell, after everyone left, I started realizing it wasn't you. It was me. All along." I listened, detached, like watching a film I'd already seen too many times. "I used to think power made me untouchable," he said. "That control was love. That fear kept people loyal. But when the walls fell, there was no one left. Not one person who cared if I lived or died." His voice cracked. "Except you. You were the only one who ever loved me without condition. And I destroyed that." The silence between us was heavy, not angry anymore, just final. "I didn't come for closure," I said softly. "I already have that. I came because once you mattered to me. And even now, I don't want to see anyone die alone." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you for coming, Ava. That's more kindness than I deserve." We sat there for a while, two ghosts from a past life. Then I stood. "I hope you find peace," I said. He looked up. "You already did." When I walked out of that cafe, I didn't look back. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't vengeance. It was released. I drove home, windows down, wind brushing through my hair. The world looked sharper somehow, colors brighter, sounds clearer. For the first time, I understood what true freedom feels like. It's not loud. It's not triumphant. It's quiet, steady, calm. That night, I found an old photograph tucked in a drawer, the two of us on our wedding day. I studied it for a while. The woman in the picture looked so young, so hopeful, so unaware of what was coming. I didn't hate her anymore. I whispered to the photograph, "You did your best." Then I placed it in a box, closed the lid, and tucked it away. The next morning, I went to the office early. The boardroom was buzzing, investors, partners, media. We were announcing a new project, the Haven Initiative, a national program to fund small businesses run by women from vulnerable backgrounds. When I took the stage, I felt the weight of every scar, every night of doubt, every step that led me there. "I was once told that I was too weak to lead," I began. "Too emotional, too soft." I believed it for years. But weakness isn't in the breaking, it's in refusing to rebuild. Today we stand as proof that no woman's story ends with betrayal. The applause was thunderous, but it wasn't the sound that moved me, it was the faces. So many of them. So alive. Later that day, my assistant walked in with an envelope. "It's from the hospital," she said softly. Aaron had passed away that morning. I stood still for a long time. Not in shock, not in grief, just still. Then I walked to the window, sunlight spilling across the floor. Somewhere out there, the last piece of that old life had ended, and I was still here. That night, I returned to the cafe one last time. I ordered coffee, sat by the same window, and pulled out my journal. On a fresh page I wrote, "He taught me what destruction looks like. I taught myself what rebuilding feels like." Then I closed the notebook, smiled, and walked out into the night. The city hummed around me, alive, endless, forgiving. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving anymore, I was living.